prophet, witches, people light. A room full of glasses. He says, you're not just liberation doll. And he chains me with that serpent to that Ethiopian wall. And I'm a rising queen of queens. Wash my guilt of Eden, wash and balance me. And I'm a rising, uprising in me tonight. She's a vengeful little goddess with an ancient crown to fight.
All right, our subject today is Antigone. We're going to talk about this amazing story from the very, very distant past and the way it comes alive in the present. Almost any time someone just breathes on it, it speaks back to the present. Here to get us started, someone we enjoyed talking to, Elizabeth Bobrick, visiting scholar in Wesleyan's Department of Classical Studies. She also teaches for Wesleyan Center for Prison Education. Her Substack is This Won't End Well on Loving Greek Tragedy, and her writing has also appeared in the New York Times and Salon. And The Conversation, one of our favorite, right. You wrote about this for The Conversation. Okay, so for people for whom this is maybe just a name, we should probably just do a quick thumbnail plot sketch. We should say that the audience arriving in 441 BC or whenever this was for the Festival of Dionysus, where this would have been a new play, they would know some of this story. They would know about our quote-unquote parents, but set the stage for us a little bit.
They would know a lot of the story. They would know the backstory, which we need to know as well.
Yeah.
So the backstory is that Oedipus, who is Antigone's father and the father of her two brothers, is dead. And one of his last acts was to curse the brothers and say, "You're going to die at each other's hands," because both of them want to be king. They want his blessing, and he says, "No. This is actually what's going to happen." So what's happened now as the play opens is that they have indeed died at each other's hands. Polynices, one of the brothers, has brought a foreign army to attack his own city. Thereby, he is a traitor, technically. Now, the remaining relative is Creon, who is now king of Thebes.
And a lot of things have happened for him kind of in a flash. He's become king. He's going to become also the guardian of whatever offspring of Oedipus and Jocasta remain. He's going to be the head of the family, too. But first, another thing has to happen, which is the brothers have to fight it out.
Right. And he is the head of the family already. So he says, "We are not going to bury a traitor." Mm-hmm. So his nephew, Polynices, Antigone's brother, is going to lie outside the city walls, mutilated with wounds of war, and we're just going to let him rot. Now, this is not only, disgusting on a personal level, it's also a serious violation of religious custom. It angers the gods, and it's just not done.
Yeah, and this isn't an original idea with me, but it does also bring to mind something from a little bit in the distant past from this, and that would be the handling of Hector's body in the Iliad, where Achilles drags it around from his chariot, and there's a lot of negotiations that go on. What's going to happen with his body? Mm-hmm. Is his father Priam going to get the body back? And you can see that what happens to a body is very important, not only just for the living, but by implication for the dead as well.
Yes, the body, and for us, too. We care what happens to bodies. Mm. And I know Brian Doris is probably going to talk about that on his, when he comes in, about, even bodies lying in the street are considered, something is really, really wrong. And when people can't bury their dead, we have to look at Gaza. This is something that's terribly distressing. So, Creon has forbidden burial, and Antigone, when the play opens, Antigone's rushes on stage. She says to her sister Ismene, "We need to bury our brother." And Ismene says, Creon said not to. He's going to put to death anybody who does. And Antigone says, come on, we got to do it. And she says, we're just girls. And that's a theme in the play, too.
And we were saying before the show started, these are young girls.
These are teenagers.
Yeah.
And that's really important to remember. But also, any girl of any age, any woman, no matter of what age, is not going to be in charge. And that's true for Sophocles' audience as well.
And so Creon has said, as you say, that you can't bury Polynices on pain of death. That's what's going to happen if somebody tries to do this. And it's really, I think, kind of remarkable in 441 BC that Sophocles opens the play with these two young women, and one of these young women is saying, I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it, and no one is going to stop me. Mm-hmm. I bet you, even at that moment, that was kind of a bracing and kind of radical way to open a show.
I agree. I think the audience, full of combat veterans, by the way, so they know something about dead bodies, and probably all men are saying, whoa, this woman is going to defy authority. So, yes, I think you're right. And, she says, I'm going to do it anyway.
We can play a little bit. This is actually from a production that we were talking about before the show started. The translation is by the Canadian poet Anne Carson. This is directed by Ivo Van Ho, and I think in 2015. You're going to hear Juliette Binoche, who's way, way too old at the time to play Antigone, but she's Juliette Binoche, and Kirsty Bushell as Ismene. You'll hear a little bit of the kind of conversation. A1, sir.
I will bury him, and this is right to do, though I die for it. One day, we'll lie together in the grave, he and I, side by side. For death is long. Death is very long. You go on worrying about the gods of life. I must worry. I'm powerless. Good excuse. Well, I'm off.
I mean, it's kind of a funny line. I'm powerless. Good excuse.
It's also a lot more than I would do. I mean, I'd have a fiery Antigone, angry 15-year-old.
And that's an angry scene, too. This turns to anger. Antigone's emotions turn to anger pretty quickly. There's so many places I want to go from here, but before we go to those, it's probably worth mentioning that a little part of this, you're talking about other veterans in the audience, dunking on Thebes is a little bit of the subtext here.
Always.
Because the Athenians don't like Thebes. They've sided with the Persians in the Persian Wars, and they have what Athenians would regard as a kind of crappy autocratic government that's full of oligarchs and unitary executives and stuff like that. So some of the message of this play is that's what happens when you don't have a democracy.
And there's something more, too. More than one tragedy is set in Thebes. Mm-hmm. And Thebes is sort of other city.
It's like 18 miles away.
Well, no, what I mean is,
I know.
We're saying, Athens is Athens, but all this horrible stuff happens in Thebes. And we as Athenians can reflect on what this means for us, because these were all very political plays, not entertainment.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that but it needs to keep its distance from Athens.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that happens pretty quickly as Antigone and Creon. Now, Creon is now her brothers are dead. Creon, who is her uncle, is now her primary guardian. And he has woman issues pretty quickly. Which
wouldn't seem at all abnormal to the audience. I mean, he's really angry. He keeps saying, no woman is going to tell me what to do, but that's standard practice. I mean, for the audience, you just don't.
Although what's interesting about that is eventually I don't know if we've mentioned Haemon yet.
We have not.
Okay, so he's her fiancé, he's her betrothed, he's Antigone's betrothed, and he's the son of Creon, all in the family. And at one point he says, the city's not with you on this. He says the citizens are kind of talking about Antigone like she's got it going on and you don't. Mm-hmm. And even the chorus is not 100% with Creon. So Creon, maybe he's reflecting the sentiment of the times. He's not that unusual, but he's unusual in how far he's willing to go with this.
Absolutely.
And his 72% of Thebans think that the city's not on the right course right now.
No, that's quite true. And what happens in a tragedy, and even and in Homer in the Iliad, When a hero says, I don't care what anybody else thinks, things are not going to go well. And that's equally true for Antigone.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm going to do it. Yes, Haimon is trying gently to tell him, and Creon is really vile in his responses. He says, he knows that, obviously Haimon doesn't want his betrothed to die. And Creon says, there is other soil for your plow. And it's like, yuck.
Yeah, and he kind of says, he kind of makes Haimon seem womanly, too. Oh, you're going to fight with women. You're going to side with women.
Right.
You're going to the women's side and all this. And, somehow it feels kind of modern. Like, Haimon is clearly a more evolved dude, and his father's not handling it very well.
Well, he loves her. I don't, and it is interesting that given the sorts of male-female relationships that we see in tragedy and in Homer and so forth, that he is really pleading her case to his father, yes.
So that doesn't work.
No, it does not.
And Haimon says a little cryptically, there's going to be another death before this is all over, or before the day is over, or something like that. And so do we cut to Tiresias at this point? Is that what we do?
I think we should say that Antigone does what she does, and that is she sneaks out, and the body is under, is being watched over by guards, but somehow she manages to get in there, probably dark of night, and she scatters a handful of dust over the body, and that's enough. That's symbolically enough. That's considered a burial. And now, all religious requirements have been met. So then one of the guards has the unhappy task of going to Creon and saying, somebody buried the body. So you can imagine how happy he was to hear that. And he says, go back and, wipe all the dust off, and he's going to stay unburied, by gum. Right? So Antigone, this is interesting, she's already met her religious requirement. She buried him. His soul has gone to Hades now. She did what she was supposed to do. She does it again. So there's not just one person who wants to make a point in this play. It's, and that time she's caught and she is brought before Creon. And he says, you're going to die now.
Yeah, you're going to die now. So we'll kind of move along here and say eventually. So she goes off.
Yeah. He doesn't want to get blood on his hands because suddenly he's aware of religious problems and he would be in trouble.
Yeah.
So he sends her to a cave outside the city walls and leaves her in there. And technically he doesn't have blood on her hands because she just is supposed to starve to death.
Right. Before we go any further, I should say some of the things we're going to talk. There's a lot of people killed themselves in this play, and so I just want to say if that triggers you, you should be listening. If you know somebody in a crisis or it's you can call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. So yes, she doesn't really wait around, does she, to die in the cave?
Well, spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler. We're going to do some spoilers. Look, the play's almost 5,000 years old. No, 3,000 years old.
Okay, but to keep the dramatic tension, yes, then the prophet Tiresias, who's never wrong, we know him from other plays, he comes to Creon and he says, you have opened the door to a lot of disaster for yourself. Right? And he says, more people are going to die.
And Creon kind of says what you said, which is, you haven't really steered me wrong too much in the past.
Well, the chorus tells Creon that.
The chorus does that. Okay.
Yeah, Creon is still, Creon. But the chorus says, and I guess he goes, I guess you're right. Yeah.
So he's now a day late and $1 short, persuaded to take a different course.
Well, so people, he sends people to rush off to where Antigone is. She has hung herself with her clothing, and Haimon, Creon's son, is with her, and he has killed himself. So the two are there, dead in this place. And then when the news reaches Creon, who's still in the city, and his wife hears that her son is dead, she kills herself.
Eurydice.
You're a clay, I think.
Euryclea,
Yeah.
whatever her name is. Yeah. So yeah, that now like
Or is it Eurydice? I'm sorry.
every possible tragedy
Yeah.
that could happen is happening now. So we should talk a little bit more about. There's so many different themes here, and we talked a little bit about the themes of gender, themes of power. I mean, Creon really does think he is a very stable genius. And I mean, he's drunk with the power that he's rather suddenly acquired. He's not handling it very well. And I think there's so many other interesting things going on, but I'm just drawn to, and our producer Lily Tyson was too, the kind of relationship that Antigone has with the dead and death. We Irish will sometimes say the veil is thin. And I think it's thin for her in one of those two Anne Carson translations. I think it's Antigone. Antigone says, "I'm a strange new kind of in-between thing, aren't I? Not at home with the dead, nor with the living." Or you could turn it around and say, she's at home with both to a certain degree, and especially with the dead.
Yeah, I mean, that's a version of it. So I think, in the ancient world, there was already a thin veil. People were, the Athenians were at war all the time. I just told my class, that before antibiotics, people died of small injuries a lot.
Yeah.
So it really was, really was part of life to bury the dead, to bury people that you love. The strange thing in the play is that before Antigone is let off, she has a big speech, and she says, "What I did, I wouldn't do it for my mother, my father. I wouldn't do it if I had a husband. I wouldn't do it for a baby if I had a baby. But I can never get another brother because my parents are dead." Now, this speech is so strange that scholars, of two previous centuries used to say, clearly somebody else wrote this and put it in. Because her whole thing has been, I have to bury my relatives. That is my duty. And it is her religious duty. And my understanding of this is that we need to keep in mind that Antigone is really young. She's maybe 15. And she's scared. And, I think it's possible that she didn't think it would come to this. And when you're faced with your own death and you're 15, I think she's doubling down and saying, I had to do it. And this is why I had to do it. Doesn't make sense to us because she's not making sense at this point.
Yeah, and there's a way in which she's talking about her brother and how she's going to spend eternity, essentially, side by side with him. She's almost kind of romanticized this whole relationship.
Which is interesting because if he had come back and been king, he would have been in charge and probably not real concerned with what she thought. No, it's terrible, but it's true.
Okay, I hadn't really gone there.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
okay. So we'll get to some of this other stuff with Robert Dorries, and this is not a conversation, this part of the conversation, I couldn't carry this more than 2 steps forward. But it's clear that as Antigone has kind of traveled through time and through intellectual time, she becomes meaningful in different ways. And so you have people like Judith Butler and Luz Irigaray using her now for feminist literature and also kind of psychoanalytic literature. Like, what if Freud had been a little less interested in Oedipus and a little bit more interested in Antigone? I mean, it's just interesting how powerful she is even in some of those quadrants.
Yes. I mean, Sophocles is a master at eliciting emotional responses to his characters. You really feel like you know them. It's unfortunate that people think that ancient drama is stiff and weird because these characters are so alive. You know people like that. And unfortunately, we know people like Creon now.
Yeah, yes, we do. We're getting to know people like that better and better every day, alarmingly. All right, so Elizabeth's going to hang out with me here. This is going to be really fun. She's in the studio with me. We're going to take a little break. Brian Dorries is going to join us in just a second. We're going to talk about some of the ways in which this narrative fits all kinds of situations very familiar to us.
'Cause I'm feeling
The wind doth blow today, my love, with a few small drops of rain. I never had but one true love, and she in the cold grave has lain.
So we're talking about Antigone today, and Antigone has been put to many uses in many different time periods. In the middle of World War II, in 1944, Jean-Henri puts on a production that is pretty clearly directed more at Vichy traitors and the way that they have tried to demonize the resistance. But then a few years later in Switzerland, Bertolt Brecht puts it on, I think it's his own special translation, and here Creon is just clearly a Nazi. So over and over, we turn back to this story. It has different kinds of meaning at different kinds of times, and somebody who's done some marvelous work with that is our next guest, Brian Dories, and I'm going to just say writer, director, and translator who currently serves as artistic director of Theater of War Productions. He's the author of The Theater of War, What the Ancient Greek Tragedies Can Teach Us Today, among other books. Brian Dories, welcome to our show.
Oh, thanks so much for the opportunity.
So you've taken Antigone kind of through three different iterations so far. Tell us about each of those.
Sure. So Theater of War Productions, it's a social impact company that uses theater as a tool for engaging communities in dialogue about challenging, often divisive subjects and public health and social justice subjects. And our first work with the play Antigone was a project called Antigone in Ferguson, which was born out of the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in August of 2014. We were approached by public officials and church leaders in Ferguson, Missouri, and in Missouri, St. Louis area. Could we come there and develop a project that would help foster healing in the wake of the uprising and the great unrest that resulted from Michael Brown's untimely death? And we decided to go to Ferguson and build a Greek chorus that couldn't preach to itself by design. And what I mean by that is a group of individuals who would perform and sing the role of the chorus in Antigone that included Michael Brown's teachers and friends, Black Lives Matter activists, members of the faith community, as well as members of law enforcement from St. Louis and Ferguson who responded to the uprising. And that became the core of the project, which we premiered on the stage that Michael Brown graduated from in September of 2016 is when we performed it with original music composed by Dr. Phil Woodmore, a local musician and conductor who also conducted the municipal police choir and brought together a lot of the singers who were part of the original production.
Okay, all that just completely took my breath away. I mean, it's such an amazing idea and such an amazing thing to have accomplished, too, because the moving parts that you're describing here, the human moving parts that you're describing, how hard was it to get everybody on the same page about this?
Well, in Theater of War Productions work, we have a very big tent in our thousands of performances over the last 18 years all across the country and the world. We have everyone from members of the Squad and prominent Democrats to QAnon followers. And the reason is that we're not asking people to agree. We're asking people to agree in only one way, to hear each other's interpretations of an ancient story. And so the objective of Theater of War Productions work isn't so much about creating a nice production that people can sort of absorb Antigone through. It's more about performing Antigone as a catalyst for a discussion that wouldn't have happened had we not come to a community and perform the play. And this idea of the Greek chorus that couldn't preach to itself by design is something we've now applied to lots of other social problems and questions, but it was born for us in Ferguson, Missouri, with that project, which we toured across the country all the way to Greece and performed in Athens, and then for 15 weeks off Broadway in New York City, in Harlem, and in Brooklyn. And
I want to get to the other two productions, but I think the important thing that you're saying too is that first of all, discussion of what has been presented is really important. And I think a lot of us, when we behold Antigone either on the page or on the stage, there's a kind of a tendency to go, well, she's very brave, and Creon kind of sucks. And that's really not exactly what you're going for here.
No, we know our projects are working when people see Creon in themselves, or they recognize the extremism in Antigone's position and don't simply see her as a proto-Christian figure or a martyr or an activist, but begin to interrogate the roles that they're playing in their own personal dramas. And when it gets complicated, when it gets messy, when people, I think that one of the powers of ancient Greek tragedy is to help us first acknowledge that we're all playing roles in our own lives, and then give us an opportunity to step back from those roles and interrogate, am I the role that I'm playing? And, I would define Greek tragedies as my functional definition of, stories in which everyone thinks they're right, and yet someone's going to die because everyone thinks they're right. So how do we avert acts of violence in the actual world? Well, Greek tragedy is a kind of rehearsal for that, for acknowledging how, if we pursue our absolute certainty and our kind of moral clarity without opening ourselves to the positions of others, then we might actually be responsible for violence if we're not careful. And one of the other definitions I like is, to think about Greek tragedy is stories about people learning too late, usually by milliseconds. And in those milliseconds, they've destroyed their families and generations to come. And so it's one thing to watch a play about people learning too late. And I think for thousands of years, we've thought that that's the end of the story. But in fact, the work that Theater of War Productions and other companies bear out is, in fact, it's only the one half of the story. And the other is the impact that watching a story about someone learning too late has upon an audience. And what's amazing about that is that what we see night after night is there's an opening to acknowledge the fleeting possibility of making change before it's too late, and how fragile that possibility is.
I want to add in at least one more iteration that you've done of this, and it's another thing that divided America, but in a different way. This is a production in 2023 called The Nurse Antigone. We'll hear a little clip from this. This is from the Green Space in New York City in 2023 with Anthony Edwards as Creon, and you'll hear three nurses as the chorus. This is B1, Gene.
Lead me out of sight, please. I am a foolish man. There is blood on my hands. I killed my wife and child. I am crushed. I have been crushed by fate.
Wisdom is the greatest gift to mortals.
The grand words of proud men are punished with great blows.
That is wisdom.
So say a little bit about this.
So that's the end of the play. And I'll say that one of the other things that's evolved out of this model of production that Theater of War Productions has been involved in, since 2016, of really deep community collaborations, is mixing some of the best actors on the planet, Anthony Edwards, lots of other actors participated in our projects who've won Oscars and Tonys and Emmys, alongside people with lived experience, people with proximity to the issues the play is talking about. And so with The Nurse Antigone, we created choruses of nurses from across the country during the pandemic and as the pandemic began to recede, to frame conversations about the past, present, and future of nursing, and in particular, the theme of deferred grief, which I know you've already been speaking with your guests today and at the center of this play. How do we help nurses begin to heal? How do we heal the social fabric of the contract that's been frayed by this pandemic that has caused such polarization in our country to the point that America's most trusted profession, nurses, is being visited by violence and skepticism and accusation. So you heard in that clip Anthony Edwards playing Creon, and the professional actor can deliver something really powerful. They can interpret the Greek play, they can commit to the emotions required. But then you heard alongside him three nurses playing the chorus. And I think there's equal value to what someone who's lived the experience of the play, saying the words, can offer that no amount of training, no amount of professional experience can actually afford. So it's the balance of the two, of having the professional actors alongside people with lived experience that then models for the audience the kind of sharing that takes place in the discussions that flow out of the performances in our model.
Yeah, and you have so much more experience of this than I do, but my experience has been when you put a famous actor in a room with somebody who has a quote-unquote real job in a profession that touches whatever the work is, the actor gets really excited. I'm guessing a lot of these fancy, bold-faced name actors get pretty interested in talking to nurses and what their jobs are like.
They don't do it for the honorarium that we pay them. I mean, their main, I think, motivation is, it's very rare in their profession to feel like they're doing something of service with their craft, not their celebrity, but their actual craft of acting. And so that's why we have over 250 actors. You can see them on our website, theaterofwar.com, who regularly fly coach, stay in a Holiday Inn, get up at the crack of dawn and perform Greek tragedy for 1,000 Marines or in a prison or with nurses in a hospital, because they know there's nothing more vital or exciting they could be doing with their time than trying to move the needle socially with their craft in a room. And so, yes, it ups the stakes. No longer is it a sort of a consumer-based equation of if people paying in to hear a great actor perform. It's no longer transactional. It's a gift exchange. And exchange moves in both directions. The nurses or the soldiers or the prisoners have as much to give as the actors and the audience.
I go back to that idea, too, of good intentions and good intentions right up to the minute where the good intentions lead to some horrible thing. It seems to touch even on the present moment, even the conversation we're having right now about health and vaccines and stuff like that. And it's hard for me sometimes to remember that the people who want to institute what I consider to be fraudulent medical practices, placing people in danger, typically have good intentions. It's not that they're corrupt. They really believe this stuff and they believe the other side is corrupt. It's so easy to forget that these people are essentially kind of well-meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just stepping into the present moment for a second. There's no underestimating the power, the lack of trust that has evolved in for our institutions, and I think the democratization of our media and all kinds of things have led to this moment, this sort of post-truth moment we're living through. But I think you're right. Underneath it all, from my experience touring the country and performing in lots of red state communities, and also blue state and highly liberal communities, people often, like in a Greek tragedy, believe they're right, think they are doing the virtuous thing, and may end up inadvertently bringing about the destruction of themselves or someone else in the process if they don't step back and interrogate why they're doing it, and also open themselves up to the possibility that there might be something they could learn from another person who has an oppositional position. I don't think the right and left in this country are going to be able to hear each other without mediation. And what I like about Greek tragedy is it's a form of mediation. We perform in mega churches. We perform in town squares and in Republican strongholds in Ohio. And the thing I hear most resoundingly from conservative audiences when they get into the performance and the discussion afterwards is, it felt so great to feel invited to the table. And I think it's incumbent upon us to find ways of communicating across these divides. Greek tragedy is one of the ways, because of the structure, the agonistic structure. It sort of models the wrong way so we can then interrogate and think about what would be the right way. So there's a difference between what happens on stage and its net result in the audience that's participating and watching.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that, and Elizabeth and I were talking in the first segment about how in 441, probably most of the 6,000 to 10,000 people sitting in that huge bowl looking down at the stage, more or less, 15,000. Okay, they're more all kind of, well, that's Thebes for you. Creon's kind of a jerk, and but that's really not what you're going for at all here. Maybe say a little bit about what happens in the discussion. In other words, you do the play and then there's discussion.
Yeah, I should say that in our work, the discussion lasts longer than the performance because the discussion is the main event. And that's even with a long play like Oedipus at Colonus. Or everything's in service of a dialogue, an exchange that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And again, not always in high test scenarios, but often in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where we did it in the camps for the guards, in rival gang territories, on neutral ground in Red Hook, Brooklyn. I mean, in MAGA stronghold in Ohio, where the stakes are high, that we have to communicate with each other. And I would say what happens in the discussion is really hard. You have to just come to a performance or tune into one of our hybrid Zoom experiences, which are all free, by the way, and open to everyone, to see is that people stand up during a discussion and they quote lines from memory from Antigone or whatever play we perform, and then relate them to their own lives, and often share things they've never shared in private, let alone in front of 400 to 1,000 people in a public setting, and make insightful sort of connections between the ancient past and the present moment in ways that I think it never gets old. If you've seen one, you've seen one, because the audience is always different. And so in our model, the audience is the main character. It's kind of like an extension of the chorus. So with our first project, Theater of War, which were born in hospitals, but then went to scale with military audiences, we learned very quickly we could get 1,000 Marines who just come back from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to talk about PTSD and moral injury and the impact of war on themselves and their families simply by performing scenes from a play by Sophocles. And I would say the same is true with these other plays, Antigone especially, in many of the settings in which we've performed it. And the magic is not necessarily in these great performances by the actors who participate, the Frances McDormands and the Oscar Isaacs and the others who perform with us. It's in what emerges in the discussion afterwards. And just to say, from my perspective, it only eliminates what a sin it's become in our contemporary mode of production and consumption of culture, that we turn the lights out on the audience in most cultural settings, relegate them to silence and darkness, and highly legislate how they talk, when they talk, if there's ever a discussion, where theater was always from the beginning an opening, an opportunity, an act of mediation. And for those 5th century BC citizen soldiers who are watching scenarios that really only those who've been to war could possibly understand, I would argue it was not entertainment, as your guest just mentioned. It was a necessary mediation, a technology designed to communalize trauma and loss and moral injury, and to, out of necessity, in a democracy in which the very fabric of that democracy hung in the balance of people being able to recover from their experiences, not just of war, but of life itself. So that's what our work is about.
Yeah, you just got a thumbs up from Elizabeth on that one. We could go on quite a bit, but we're kind of out of time here. Brian Doris, thank you so much. Writer, director, translator, who currently serves as artistic director of Theater of War Productions. Check them out. Author of The Theater of War, What Ancient Greek Tragedies Can Teach Us Today, among other books. We're going to talk about music in this play when we come back.
I thought living's when you feel things, and then dying's when you're done. But I felt every heart I'd broken in the words I should have spoken. But I'm just sitting there watching it all go down at my own funeral.
And we are back. It's time to say some thank yous. Our technical producer today is it is the Jedi Master. It is the Yoda. It is Gina Matruda. It is the Obi-Wan. Also assisted by our usual technical producer, the Maestro Dylan Reyes. He's the one who's been helping cut up some of the music that we've been using here today. And this obviously is a Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions production. She is the producer of this, and if there's anybody else I'm forgetting to thank, she's probably about to tell me. But we're going to spend a little bit, just a few minutes here at the end. I mean, one of the things that's sort of hard to know is what would this have sounded like? We can maybe guess more easily what it looked like than what it sounded like. But one of the people trying to puzzle that out right now is Anna Conser, an assistant professor of classics at the University of Cincinnati. She's joining us now. First of all, welcome to the conversation. And second of all, what can we say in general about what this might have sounded like? You know, we just heard Brian Doris talking about how they compose their own music when they do these productions. There would have been some kind of music in Antigone in 441, right?
Most certainly. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
I would argue that music really was the dominant element in Greek tragedy in a lot of ways. For the audience that came to see the shows, A singing, dancing chorus of 14 young people moving in unison, singing in unison, is just spectacular, to be honest. It's something that really engages a broad audience and brings them into the show.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that when they saw Antigone in 441, there were probably only 3 people playing all the principal roles on stage.
Yeah, so there'd be 3 speaking actors who divided up the roles. You'd have some double casting, and we don't know exactly how that works out, but in many cases you can figure it out. It's often very interesting and almost symbolic in some cases. But the chorus, by contrast, is a huge number of people, very loud, all those voices working together. And Antigone in particular has a lot of music. There are 5 formal choral odes that would have been sung and danced. And in addition to that, we have 2 actor songs, 2 monodies, both of which are laments. We have Antigone's grand aria at the halfway point, and then Creon sings an antiphonal lament with a chorus in the final scene, capping off the tragedy.
If there was instrumentation, I gather it might have been an instrument called the aulos. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you are, the aulos. This is in a lot of older translations, you'll see the word flute. It is definitely not a flute. It's a loud, blaring instrument. It was even said to inspire madness in people who heard it, tied to Dionysian music in particular.
We're going to play a little sample of it, played
Wonderful.
by Colin Armstrong. I pretty much guarantee you will not go mad. It's only 15 seconds long. C1, please. I just want to quickly also add, we talked about music with Brian Dories. In 1841, they did this play, I think at the behest of the King of Prussia, and Felix Mendelssohn composed a lot of music for it that did survive. And so there's something about this. The music kind of goes with it. Can you at all give us a sense of what the spoken or chanted sounds of Antigone would sound like? Can you give us a little mini performance or something?
Yeah. So there's one that I particularly like. It's one of the most famous tragic odes that we have, is sometimes referred to as the Ode to Man. It's the first standing song or stasimone in Antigone. But you might think of Greek odes as very kind of poetic or distant, but when you listen to it, it's extremely rhythmic. So here I'll read it in Greek with the rhythms that are inherent to the text that we have. And I'll try and include some of the pitch accents as well to give a sense of the natural melody built into the language. Polla tadein nakuden anthropu de noteron pelle. Tu tokai poliu peran, pontu he merioi notoi chorei peri brucioi sin peron hupoid masin theon tetan huper tatan gan aftiton a kamatan apotru etai illomenon arotron etos eis etos hippeioi gene polauon. So they're really pretty catchy.
They are. I was starting. It's a nice bop, as the young people say. I guess people are probably wondering, how can you know? In other words, there will be no way to kind of pass this along, at least as an auditory product. So how do you figure out what things sounded like?
Yeah, so this is really kind of the core of my research, is looking at sound patterning in the text. We're really lucky with ancient Greek. While we don't have any music notation or rhythmic notation from this early period, we do have some from later periods. The language itself is naturally musical. So you have a contrast between long and short syllables, and we have ancient music theorists who tell us that in music, they were typically performed as the equivalent of quarter notes and eighth notes, one twice as long as the other. And then we also have pitch accents, which play against that. So melodic rises and melodic falls that are built into the language that give it a natural musical quality.
Speaking of natural musical qualities, just hear a little bit from a production directed by you. This is not of Antigone, but it's Sophocles, Women of Trachis. Is that how I would say the name? Trachis? Okay. Trachis in ancient Greek with music composed by Melody Lovelace based on Anna's research. This performance is by the Barnard Columbia Ancient Drama Group. This is just a tiny little bit, C2. I guess one thing that you can say is how this changes the experience for the audience. So, if we're going to see Antigone, if we're going to see Sophocles or Aeschylus or Euripides, we often will just see it as a play, a spoken word play or an acted word play. You let people have this other experience. Can you say a little bit, we are almost out of time, how it changes the experience when you have the rhythm of the speech, the percussive sounds of the music? What does it do to the material and the audience?
I think maybe the biggest effect it has is it shakes up your idea of what a classical artwork sounds like. It's very accessible. It's very engaging. It breaks down kind of the idea of high art and low art. We tend to think of musical theater as a pop form that would be incompatible with Greek tragedy, but really they are the same thing. But it's done in a way that's really lovely, and you can create a lot of meaning through music. We would never consider seeing an opera or a musical and thinking of the lyrics without their music. And in the same way, if you have Sophocles creating music and words together, he's likewise creating meaning through his music and also through his dance.
Well, yeah, I'm fascinated by all this. And yeah, I think we tend to think when we go to plays, whether it's Shakespeare or Sophocles, that, we go to theaters and people, I'm sure they didn't say to the audience in Athens, please unwrap any grape leaves that you have before the performance starts and don't make any. I mean, this clearly was probably a kinetic, boisterous, exciting experience for the audience, and we're at minimum nodding along, if not doing more than that. This has been fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for your time today. To all of our guests, all these wonderful guests. Anna Conser is Assistant Professor of Classics at the University of Cincinnati. We have to say goodbye, so we will say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be doing more very soon.
Frozen, my eyes won't close, and I can't say no. I can't say no. Careful. Step on the glass, staple your tongue. Bury a friend, try to wake up. Cannibal class, killing the sun. Bury a friend. I wanna end me. I wanna end me. I wanna end me. What do you want from me? Why don't you run from me? What are you wondering? What do you know? Why aren't you scared of me? Why do you care for me? When we all fall asleep, where do we go?